It's over to you.
Okay, thank you. My name's Hervé and I'm an addict.
Hi, Hervé.
And it's really nice to be here. Thank you for asking Rose in your absence. And yeah, it's a bit weird being recorded. I don't really like the sound of my own voice, so I was thinking, But good to be here. Yeah, very happy to be in a meeting, and especially an NA meeting. I'm not really sure what I'm going to talk about, but it's long-term recovery, so I qualify. I like the logo of this meeting, dinosaur, and sometimes I feel a bit like a dinosaur, especially around the drugs I used to take. It feels like old drugs. And so I've been in recovery. I first came in 1991, and I was on methadone, and somebody took me here, so I didn't really know what to expect, and it was a bit... I went to the Archway meeting on a Monday night, and it was a very big meeting, and it was a bit scary, I like what I heard, but I was a bit, there's a lot of people are kind of brutally honest here, do you know what I mean? And I wasn't like that then. And then I came back after more misery. I came back in 1992, 20th of February, and that's my kind of clean time. So I've been like 34 years clean and sober. And so I was 27 when I came in, and now I'm 61, 62 this year. So I feel like I've done a lot of growing up in this fellowship. So I'm very, very grateful for it, I didn't think it was going to work, by coming in and just kind of being in a room full of people and just talking, I was like, I was a bit desperate. I wanted to kind of a magic pill to take it away now. Do you know what I mean? I didn't realize that, I guess I thought my problem was just drugs, I was a heroin addict. I came in, it was pretty obvious that I had a problem. I was injecting, I had no veins left, I'd been to prison. I was pretty desperate, and it was enough for me, I was enough, I had enough, I was desperate physically, emotionally, spiritually. I was kind of, there was nowhere else to go really, I was kind of suicidal, really depressed, do you know what I mean? And I'd been depressed for years without knowing it, and so coming here was the last chance saloon, and so I came into the rooms, and then I was very lucky that I found people that I knew from my using that were clean. So that was like, wow, it works. One of my friends was 3 years, he's about 3 years clean, and and I knew his history, he was a proper addict. And in my books, and I kind of looked up to him when I was using, he was one of the cool kids, and he didn't even smoke cigarettes. Do you know what I mean? And he had a business, he was clean, and then there was another guy that I used to use with, and and I thought, wow, So I kind of paid attention and did what was suggested, 90 meetings in 90 days. I got a sponsor that, was also a heroin addict. He was a few years clean. And then, started doing meetings every day, got commitments, and in the early days I was very, very nervous, I always felt uncomfortable, do you know what I mean? That dis-ease, ill at ease with myself. I really understand that, do you know what I mean? I always, as a child, felt really uncomfortable, do you know what I mean? Even now sometimes, just kind of, a lot of the time, never enough, and, just kind of always had a big ego and low self-esteem. So I'd be really here, there, and everywhere, really busy, hanging around with lots of different people. Grew up in the south of France, and then LSD happened, and then I was a changed person. felt really fucked up. God, you know, I always say that I went to see The Shining when I was tripping, and it was just like I was a different person by the time I came out, you know, of the cinema. We should have gone and see the Disney film, but we went to see the fucking Shining, and I was, you know, I felt like I was like, you know, reset. Anyway, long-term recovery. So as I said, I've been around for a long time. The reason I'm here, I believe, is because I never left. I always kind of do meetings. I love meetings. You know, if I could, I do 3 meetings a week. You know, if I've got a lot of free times, I do more. You know, because, and I believe that, you know, I really believe I'm a work in progress. That's why I've never felt cured. Do you know what I mean? Addiction is kind of, well, you know, at times it's been in every part of my being. Do you know what I mean? I guess they say it's an illness of self, you know, and I know exactly what that means. You know, I mean, I'm in self a lot of the time. You know, it's all about me. I can be very selfish, self-centered, you know, not as much as I used to be. You know, I guess having kids helped. You know, I've got 3 boys, so you know, obviously I knew how to put other people's first, but even now I used to resent it. Do you know what I mean? They're kind of infringing on whatever else I want to do, you know, and but they turned out really well. Do you know, I guess recovery works. Do you know what I mean? You know, my older boy is 26, he's 5 years clean of his own volition. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't go to meetings, but he's found his thing in life, so he's really well. He's not an addict, but he could have been. I've got a 16-year-old who's full of testosterone, who's doing his, he's in the gym, he's in his boxer shorts all year round, full of himself. He's like a TikTok celebrity in North London, apparently. And he's quite challenging. I've got a 14-year-old boy who's just like a PS5. You leave him on the chair for a week, you come back, he'll still be there, you know. But he's lovely, you know. And yeah, recovery has been good for me. So, you know, if you're new around, you know, we're in the right place, you know. My life has been good, you know. I guess the obsession took about 6 months to lift. You know, and I mean, there was like time in the early days where I thought, you know, I nearly went back, but I was lucky to go into treatment when I was kind of 3 months. You know, I just kind of waited, you know, came off my script and you know, waited and then went into treatment, and that was my first thing with the steps. You know, I'd done treatment before, I'd done Concept House, but it didn't work. I wasn't ready. But this time, you know, just introduced to the steps and the spiritual malady. Do you know what I mean? And knowing that the first one does the damage. You know, I've got once I start, I can't stop. You know, all bets are off, and it can be the same with everything for me. Do you know what I mean? I'm a few weeks off sugar, which is another thing that could kill me as well. You know, I think I'm 6 weeks off sugar. And it's something that I do quite often, because I go back to it and then it nearly kills me. Do you know what I mean? You know, I've had Hep C, I've got a liver who's in trouble, so I need to kind of look after myself. And, you know, I can be a TV addict. Do you know what I mean? I used to be a sex addict. Used to be. You know, one thing I say in recovery is that, you know, people complain about waking up in the same bed, you know what I mean? And, yeah, that's, you know, that's what people say. When I used to drink, I used to wake up in, you know, but I wake up very much in my own bed, you know. Yeah. Yeah, no, recovery has been good. I mean, it's been challenging, you know. I've realized now, you know, sometimes for years I kind of coasted and maybe doing 1 meeting a week, or, do you know what I mean? Not kind of looking at the program, but things have, you know, the wheels fell off the wagon a few times, you know what I mean? I really had to kind of do what was needed at the time, you know, because you know, at times in recovery I suffered from depression, and it was even worse than my using. Do you know what I mean? Because I was clean. And, you know, just kind of, and this kind of hit me in my, you know, over 20 years clean, do you know what I mean? When I thought, fucking hell, you know, all of a sudden my character defects, you know, I was so full of self-pity and I couldn't even see it, you know, and so depressed, I really had to kind of work hard on getting back to, you know, to the program. But, you know, it's a program that keeps on giving, you know, and, you know, I don't know what I would do, you know, without this fellowship. I wouldn't even contemplate, you know, every time I'm traveling, I go to meetings, you know, in recovery, I bought a house in France, and I go to meetings there as well. So I've been quite involved in the fellowship there in this small town, which is kind of really small. So that's been really good, you know what I mean? There's about 100,000 people, and there's a pool of about maybe 20 recovering people out of, you know, all these people. It's absolutely mad, you know what I mean? But it's so special to be part of this, you know. So I guess what I'm saying is I keep myself safe, you know. I know what I can get away and what I can't. So I try to, you know, prevent more than, you know, at the moment. And, yeah, you know, I'm getting on. And, you know, I've been away. I just went to Budapest, got my teeth fixed, you know, which was like something that I suffered with, you know, being an addict and having bad dentistry in the 80s. Do you know what I mean? That they used to take all your teeth out. You gouge in the chair and you wake up and they've taken all your teeth out, you know. That's what it was like for me, do you know what I mean? As, you know, trusting people, you know, he must know he's the dentist, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, pleased about that. It was needed, you know, and yeah, I kind of look after myself now, you know. I was lucky enough to kind of work the whole of my recovery. You know, currently I work in South London, so I cycle. I'm a big kind of cyclist, you know, enthusiast. So I do Haringey to Lewisham every day. That's about, you know, let's say about 2.5 hours cycling. So, and it's good for me because it's kind of give me a bit of time to take stock, you know, and I do believe in a higher power, you know, not necessarily a religious thing, but, you know, I do believe in meditation. I pray in the morning, do you know what I mean? I say that the step 3 prayer, step 7, and, you know, God take my will in my life, guide me in my recovery, show me how to live, do you know what I mean? That's what I need to do, you know, and say the serenity prayer, you know. And then do meditation, you know, and that was really good, you know, mindfulness when I was depressed or when I feel like I'm kind of getting depressed, you know, because a lot of the time when I was getting depressed, it started with insomnia, you know. All of a sudden I get insomnia for weeks, you know, and still working and getting more and more hyper and depressed, do you know what I mean? And couldn't stop my head, you know, my head would always be on, you know, and so, you know, I started doing meditation in a big way, you know, and doing kind of loving kindness, going to the Buddhist center and those kind of things, or doing it on my own, or listening to tapes, you know, and it's been really, it's a very simple thing, but it's a very efficient thing, you know, and yeah, the steps, of course, you know. Now, but by being a dad, I've got a lot more, I'm a lot more gentle with myself, and I can understand what I was like when I was 16, do you know what I mean? Because that's where everything went wrong, you know, from the age the age of 16. I'm still dealing with stuff now that went on between the age of 16 and 27, let's say, you know, even earlier, you know, and it was fucking crazy, you know, and in recovery, as I was saying, years in, I've got PTSD from all this stuff, you know, all this kind of trauma that came out, you know, and took me by surprise, you know, even though most of the stuff I did address in the steps, and I did talk to people about it, you know. My recovery, it's always been about, you know, say as it is, you know, and I can be a bit of an oversharer, you know. If you kind of go to the same meetings as me, there's not a lot you won't know about my life or my wife's, do you know what I mean? Or, do you know what I mean? I just kind of, yeah. And I guess if I would do it again, I probably wouldn't do that. Do you know what I mean? I hear people saying in recovery, you know, I talk to God, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Do you know what I mean? Because I came in, I was really guarded about everything, and then, you know, a few years down the line, I'm fucking like, you know, having years and years of therapy, I'm just kind of used to kind of saying things as they happen, you know, and it's not a bad thing. I guess that's the way I operate, you know, and yeah, I mean, recovery is amazing, really, you know. I can see the change in me, you know, and you know, things aren't perfect, but, you know, they're a lot better than it was. You know, I'm married, but I'm separated. I still live with my wife, do you know what I mean? But we're good friends, but it took a while. You know, when this first happened, I was getting a bit resentful, do you know what I mean? And, but we're bringing up the kids together, you know, and it's actually okay now, you know, but it took a little while, you know, and it's somebody who's not in recovery who keeps saying, you know, you keep reading the same books, obviously they don't work, do you know what I mean? And, you know, but yeah, and yeah, I was in France earlier as well. I was spending time with my mom. She's very pleased, obviously, that I'm been in recovery all these years, you know. I've got a brother who was visiting as well from Thailand, and I've been trying to bring him in since the 90s, you know, and but, you know, anyway, I know the only thing I can change is me, and then when I get myself out of the way, my life is a lot easier, you know. Still got a big problem with my ego, and you know, and when I do a lot of meetings, you know, my kind of problem seems to melt away, you know, when I speak to my sponsor once a week, and you know, I've got sponsees, and you know, I spend time with recovering addicts and alcoholics, you know, I do a lot of AA meetings, and you know, I'm not cured, but you know, if you're new around, you know, you're in the right place, and yeah, I've got 1 minute to go, so I think I'm going to wrap it up here, and thank you so much for asking.
Thank you.